ब्रह्मणे नमः। ॐ महेश्वराय नमः। ॐ विष्णवे नमः। ॐ ताण्डवे नमः। ॐ भरताय नमः। ॐ अभिनवगुप्तपादाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सद्गुरुभ्यो नमः। ॐ प्रणम्य शिरसा देवो पितामहमहेश्वरो नाट्यशास्त्रं प्रवक्ष्यामि ब्रह्मणा यदुदाहृतम्।
Namaskar. Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts very proudly present the documentation of 108 Karanas. 108 Karanas have been the transitions. People often mistake it as mudras, but they are not mudras, they are movements, they are transitions. It has been depicted in the 4th chapter of the Natya Shastra, that is Tandav Lakshanam. Many researches have been done on these Karanas, but a remarkable documentation has been made by veteran scholar and dancer Dr. Padma Subrahmanyam. She had her own theory of reconstruction of these Karanas. 50 years back, she started her research and journey, and that has come a long way through. We decided to have an epic documentation of these 108 Karanas. We requested Dr. Padma Subrahmanyam ji to just guide us in this documentation. She has been very kind to provide us the material, the time and her intellect for this documentation. We know that this remarkable documentation is going to be the landmark in the history of dance and Natya Shastra. We were also happy that a veteran scholar, Dr. Shatavadhani Ganesh, was also available for his commentary for this documentation. Dr. Gayatri Kannan has been instrumental in bringing these scholars together, and young but very talented dancer Mahati Kannan was there to demonstrate this documentation. We are happy that this documentation is going to be available for the research scholars and students across the globe, because we know that the Natya Shastra is not only the text which belongs to India, but it belongs to the entire Southeast Asia. We also know that this Indian text has been referred in the entire globe as a monumental text for theatre and theatrics. I am sure that this documentation is going to be helpful for entire university students, dance scholars and researchers wherever they are, who would like to know about Natya Shastra, about mudras, about movements. Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, under its Kalakosa division, has been doing this kind of documentation for providing enough study and research material for the scholars who are interested in Indian heritage, culture and its tradition. Now, let us see this documentation and enjoy the remarkable tradition, the remarkable textual tradition of our Indian culture and heritage.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
I must thank Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, Delhi, for having asked me to record the detailed account of how I reconstructed the 108 Karanas of Natya Shastra. This is already 53rd year of my having started studying Natya Shastra, and I feel it is my responsibility towards the posterity to tell how I reconstructed the movements, because the fact is that the Karanas were not in vogue, maybe not in vogue in North India after 12th century and in South India after 14th century. There has not been an awareness about Natya Shastra, but elements of Natya Shastra have been very much part of Deshi elements. By Deshi, I don't mean folk. Sometimes it is wrongly interpreted as folk. All the neoclassical dances like Bharatanatyam, Mohiniyattam, Odissi, Kathak, all these dances of India today, classical particularly, are nothing but daughters of Natya Shastra. There has been always a link between Marga, that is the original common grammar that Bharata formulated for entire Indian subcontinent or even more with regard to performing arts, and the regional interpretations and observations which are Deshis. Like how Sanskrit language has coexisted with all the rich regional Prakrits, the Natya Shastra and the elements of Natya Shastra are seen scattered all over, and each style has retained something of Natya Shastra without an awareness about that concept of having had one common grammar. Now, I am very thankful to IGNCA Regional Center in Bangalore for having given us the space to record and document this whole process. And I am very thankful to Dr. Shatavadhani Ganesh, who is going to be asking questions, adding comments, and clarifying many points, because he is a multi-faceted scholar. And Dr. Gayatri Kannan, who has been my disciple for at least 4 decades, she will be reading out my own book on Karanas, and what has been recorded already is in the Karana Prakaranam, a DVD that we brought out, but I did not record more than one interpretation for each of the element. Whenever there is a possibility of one more interpretation, another disciple of mine, Mahati Kannan, will be demonstrating these as Gayatri reads out. Now we will go ahead with Dr. Ganesh giving us a general introduction.
Thank you. Namaskar. The beauty of Natya Shastra is, it is a great revelation, codification, compilation, and also a fountainhead of so many interpretations and so many understandings. In one way, Bharata is the confluence of all that holy past, and at the same time, he became the inspiration and fountainhead for further discussions and further explanations. In that way, Bharata is very, very unique for all performing arts and even literary arts. At the same time, Bharata is not a dry codifier. He is an inspired artist, a great seer of higher intuition, was a great practitioner as well, and a masterly teacher. Put together all these qualities of Bharata, brought out such a magnificent treatise. And that's why in this same Natya Shastra, Bharata at one place discusses about the pramanas that have to be considered into any such deliberations. Natya Shastra, like any other Shastra, has its own pramanas. We all know pramanas are the universal agreements based on those agreed modules, further discussions and deliberations will all go naturally, and that is the most scientific way and objective way of exploration too. Like our Shastras have Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapatti, Anupalabdhi, Aptavakya or Shabda, the Tarkikas, the Mimamsakas, the Vedantins, all these systems of philosophies they had. Likewise, Natya Shastra too is a Shastra, and is Shastra meant for moksha apart from Dharmartha Kama. So it is Chaturvarga Praptikaraka Shastram, and hence Bharata has clearly given Loka, Veda and Adhyatma are the threefolded Pramanas for Natya Shastra, and it is very heartening to know, and of course it's too natural and obvious thing too, that Dr. Padma Subrahmanyam has considered all these Pramanas while she had a wonderful journey through these Karanas in the half century that we have been witnessing. And here in the Loka, the world around and even the world of practitioners is taken into account, where the Lokadharmi and Natyadharmi both are integrated and taken care of. At the same time, it is the Veda, that Natya Veda, the compiled and codified knowledge of all the seers from time immemorial. We know from the treatise of Panini, Bhagavan Panini, that Shilali, Krishashva, such people, such masters had their own Nata Sutras. Bharata again in this text says, Atra Anuvamshiya Arye Bhavataha, Atra Anuvamshiyo Shloko. Like that, he too is indebted to the past masters. Like that, all that past knowledge verified, scrutinied, and verified through their experiences, that is being termed as Natya Shastra. And at the same time, it is the culmination of all the four Vedas, Patim, Jagrahar, Veda, like that we have. So, Rigyaja, Sama, Atharva, everything put together, it has become Sarvavarnika Veda and Panchama Veda. That is Veda. And then it is Adhyatma. Bharata clearly says about Adhyatma, and Abhinavagupta wonderfully explains. Adhyatma is the intuitive experience of a seasoned artist, seasoned master who has understood the pulse of art in and out. In that way, the threefolded Pramana are very, very important. And even the great Shankar Bhagavad-Padacharya in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya clearly says Anubhava has a greater validation, and Anubhava ultimately means Pratibha itself. Like Mahima Bhatta says, Sahichakshur Bhagavataha Tritiyamiti Giyate Yena Pashyanti Kavyarthan Bhavans Trailokya Vartinaha. Pratibha, the third eye, can visualize everything belonging to the three worlds of the three times. And that's why Abhinavaguptapada in the Dhvanya Lokalochana, in the very first chapter at the conclusion says, Yadun Milana Shakyeva Vishwam Unmilati Swayam Swatma Yatana Vishrantam Vandeham Pratibham Shivam Vandeham Pratibham Param. Like that means when that eye opens, the rest of the world too opens. Only to a Pratibha Shalim, to a person of Pratibha, the secrets of Shastra, the secrets of art will all be revealed. And that's so Padma Subrahmanyam had taken care of all these Pramanas, and in the course of our discussions, here and there, often, we will be revealing such interesting points also.
We will first start from Angas, Upangas. These are all elements of Karanas. Karana was very wrongly understood as static postures.
Yes.
Till about early 60, it was in 1962 that I realized that Karana is a movement and not a static posture. And my first research article in Assam Research Journal is where I mentioned for the first time that Karana is a movement and not a static posture. Till then, many scholars were also writing about Karana as Karana poses.
How can it be possible? Because Abhinavabharati itself clearly says that it's
Well, see, study of a text is different from actual performance. So there has been a gap between theory and practice. Lakshana Lakshya Viruddham has been there for centuries. And to fill up this gap between Lakshana and Lakshya Viruddham, to bridge this gap was the very goal of my life. And I tried my best, and I hope I have done something which I am leaving for posterity. Karana is defined in Natya Shastra as Hastapada Samayogaha Nrittasya Karanam Bhavet. That is Hasta, a combination of hand gestures and movements of the feet, or rather I would say legs. In dance is called a Karana. Nrittasya Karanam Bhavet. We walk to the bus stand, we walk anywhere around, we use our legs, we swing our hands, that can't be called Karana. This combination of movements of hands and feet in dance is called Karana. This is what Bharata says. And Abhinav Gupta has further explained that by Pada, we must take it as meaning the entire lower half of the body, all the angas of the lower parts of the body. And by Hasta, we must understand it includes the entire upper part of the body. So the Karana is a combination of movements of right from the head to the toe, and how beautifully it can be performed, how much of aesthetics is embedded in it is something which I had been going on researching and feeling in my body. And that's how I reconstructed, not only with the help of literature, but with the help of dance sculptures, particularly the Karana sculptures of Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple, the Karana sculptures of Sharanpani Swami temple at Kumbakonam, and the Karana sculptures at Chidambaram. These sculptures have been my guiding factors. So when there is a lacuna in the sutra or a lacuna in the commentary also, for example, the hand movement is not at all given in some Karanas. The leg movements is not at all mentioned for some Karanas. Then I have these sculptures to fall back upon. This is how I reconstructed each Karana movement.
Akka, at this juncture, I remember in one of your writings, you had told that the higher level of defining Karana would be something like this: Atmakaya Samayoga Nritasya Karanam Bhavet. This very closely resembles the definition of Kavya provided by people like eminent scholars like Bhamaha, who preceded Abhinav Gupta. Shabdarthav Sahitav Kavyam. Sahitav Kavyam means the form and content, the inseparability of form and content, where content is rasa, and rasa is the highest spiritual wisdom as well. Nahi rasadrute kaschitartha pravartate. There is no purpose beyond rasa, and raso vaisaha in the Upanishad Taittiriya. Like that, it's not just the physical activity, it is a spiritual force that drives. And in that sense, the pramana of Adhyatma invariably comes into picture. As Manu says, Vedo Khilo Dharma Moolam, Smritishile cha Tadvidam, Acharashchaiva Sadhunam, Swatmanas Tushtirevacha, Swasyacha Prematmanaha. The Veda, the Smritis. Now the Veda is not a Shastra. Smriti is the hoary tradition of the texts like Sangeeta Ratnakara and others which came after Bharata. And then Sheela, the character and nature of the masters who never wrote anything but they practiced faithfully and then propagated the knowledge. And then Acharashchaiva Sadhunam, the tradition, living tradition even today which is seen, that is Acharashchaiva Sadhunam. The pious dance teachers and dance masters and Natunars and Devadasis, all those people, they come as the Acharas, and then they have this Swasyacha Prematmanaha. What is the aesthetic appeal? What is the agreement that comes because of the enrichment of all these aspects? And everything of that kind would have triggered you to define, give a higher criticism to Karana itself.
Paduka, another thing is, I remember even before you started work on the Karanas, you had already used certain movements like Mattalli or even Urdhva Janu, Dola Pada in your earlier choreographies. And I remember you telling that you haven't even watched Odyssey at that time. You were not exposed to those styles. But somewhere it must have been within you that you used those movements even without knowing the Shastra. And later you started the work and you understood that those movements had a Shastra Pramana also.
Well, yes, probably I should call myself a yoga brishta. something I did in my previous Janma, and it was a continuation. Probably without that, I wouldn't have been able to understand Natya Shastra and sculptures. I would go and stand in front of the sculpture, and the sculpture will move. It will move, it will show me the action. If I say this, either they take me as a fraud or they'll think I'm mad. This is the only way this will be viewed. But the fact is this, somewhere I have to tell the truth. I've never mentioned. So, the sculptures are like Dakshinamurti for me.
Mauna Vyakhyan.
Mauna Vyakhyan.
Communication through silence.
Communication through silence, that has been there in my life. And she is very right. I was hardly 17 when I choreographed some jatis for Meenakshi Kalyanam. Old Meenakshi Kalyanam I choreographed before I was 20. And I used Ratakrantachari, Dolapada,
Samotsarita Mattalli.
Samotsarita Mattalli, many of these Karanas. Whatever I did had a semblance of sculptures in me. Urdhva So it is not as though I was satisfied with that. I knew there was something more. Looking at the sculptures, I thought, why am I not being taught these movements? I only thought of the sculptures as movements even then, even in my teenage. And I used to think, why am I not being taught these? But there was no answer to this. Thanks to Dr. T. N. Ramchandran, I started studying Natya Shastra under him. And that was also I would say a windfall, because my eldest brother Balakrishnan, who was a filmmaker, was doing a film on temples of Tamil Nadu. And he fell sick. And my father said, I should sit by his bedside and read the relevant books for him, because he was not in a position to read. So reading those books like Henry Zimmer and so many relevant books, it opened a new vista before me. I knew what exactly I wanted. I wanted to study the sculptures. I wanted to see how they are connected to some other Shastra which makes them dance. And as I said, this is Pratibha.
I remember a beautiful parallel when Sri Ramakrishna Paramhansa had his spiritual experiences. He was not Shastrajna. Then came Bhairavi Brahmini. She opened the text, relevant text, and showed what experiences you get. It's not madness, it's not illness. They are spiritual experiences. Like that, your experience with sculptures were verified by the Natya Shastra, the help of course, T. N. Ramchandran and your own.
Not only the Karanas, many things like, for example, Sukalasya. Sukalasya is it's an item that I choreographed and composed music together. I conceive music and movement together. And I gave a name, Sukalasya, to that. Much later, I came across a name Sukalasa in Nritta Ratnavali. And that is total synchronization of music and dance. I didn't know, I had not studied Nritta Ratnavali at that time. Even the name was very close by. I called it Sukalasa, and in the text I found that Sukalasa, it's one of the 40 and odd Lasyangas. Here Lasyangas, by Lasyangas in these later works, they mean the beautification in dance, like how a dancer enters, how the dancer finishes, all those details are there. And this total synchronization of music and dance is Sukhalasa, and Padapata is complete synchronization of the jati, the bowls, and the footwork. This I came across later, but I had composed music in Todi, and I choreographed it much earlier. So it is only a continuation of my past.
Another thing is, now we have been learning the basic concepts of Natya Shastra, starting from the Angas, and we have learnt the Charis, Thanas, Nrittahastas and the Karanas. When we start reading your work, or when we go to the Moola of the Natya Shastra and read Bharata Sutra, even now it is difficult for us to understand, because Bharata gives it more as a formula. There is not much description at all. Sutra. Even when we read the Abhinavagupta translation of the commentary, with the knowledge of, practical knowledge of Karanas, certain things we are not able to make sense. It's difficult to understand. So how was it possible for you to connect all these with barely any knowledge of the Marga?
Another major problem that I was facing was, I did not know the methodology, and there was no teacher to guide me from a practical point of view.
Correct.
And the Natya Shastra format is completely upside down.
Yes.
You know, it starts with the whole.
Yes.
In the 4th chapter, Bharata speaks of the Karanas, Angaharas, still worse.
Yes.
And
Somewhere he gives the
and only from about 8th chapter, you get all the elements of Karanas.
Yes.
So it was like reading reverse. But I didn't know that one had to go through the Angas to understand the Karanas. So it took 10 years for me to reconstruct. My PhD thesis was 10 years. I couldn't finish it in 3 years. Because, for instance, Dola Padas Tata Chaiva Gajakriditakam Bhavet. Dola Padas, what is Dola Pada?
Go to the Chari Adhyaya.
Then you have to go search for it. Oh, okay, this is Dola Padachari. After completing the reconstruction of the Karanas, I worked on a pedagogy. I didn't want my students to suffer like how I suffered. So I created a pedagogy course starting with Angas, Upangas, Sthanas, Nrittahastas, Charis, and then I teach them the Karanas. They are able to immediately relate. If I say do Dola Padachari, my students will immediately do. Connecting that with another Chari or another Nrittahasta, the Karana is there.
In this way,
So
they have
this
successfully made how to write a dance in phonetic language. This is programming of dance.
Yes, dance notation becomes
Yes,
easy for us.
Very easy and specific, accurate.
So we can even think of, she was asking about how I was able to do it. It was not easy. It was so difficult. And Gayatri's mother, Uma Sriram, was my first student. She and her younger sister, Sundari Sardanam, they both were my guinea pigs.
I remember
I
you
tried
telling,
all my Karanas on them.
and you said that you used to make them dance, and if you felt the reconstruction was not aesthetic enough, in spite of all the connections that you had, you would change it again. You would evolve into evolve it into a different
I'm still
movement.
doing it. I'm
Yes,
still doing
it's
it.
a very, very important point. Aesthetics, of course, is subjective, but at the same time, it is an objective thing also
Yes.
to an extent, because a beautiful thing will also be a perfect thing. Even in the Western tradition, starting from Plato and others, we have such concept, and that's why in our tradition also, Sundara, it's Satya too. truth and beauty are inseparable. They are one and the same. Satchidananda, Ananda is Sundara, and Sat is truth. And we have the connection of Chit. Jnana is needed to realize the beauty of truth and the truth of beauty.
When you say Chit, I want to add this. See, after performing all the 108 Karanas together, my students do that. We've all performed this together. It will take about 40 minutes to perform all the 108 Karanas. I've tuned them. I've tuned the shlokas from Natya Shastra as a Lakshana Gita. And you wouldn't believe me, it is a physical strain. But after finishing all the 108 Karanas danced, you will feel absolutely fresh, as though you are flying in the air.
You're re-energized.
You are re-energized. That's the greatness of the Karana movements. It gives you some kind of a soul satisfaction. So it is not simply a fanciful phrase that I said, Atma Kaya Samayoga Nrityasya Karanam. It is something I had felt, and not only me, all my students have felt. And one more thing I would like to add here is, Karanas are not just, they are called Nritta Karanas, but Nritta Karanas can still be used for Vakyartha Abhinaya.
Yes.
It is mentioned in the Shastra itself, and because it can be used for Vakyartha Abhinaya, I don't agree with medieval authorities that Nritta is Bhava Vihinam or Rasa Vihinam. This is something which I have very boldly said. And because even Nritta needs that Rasa. Nritta has to have that Bhava. Nritta, when you see an excellent performer like Pandit Birju Maharaj performing a very complicated tukra, he enjoys. It's not only he who enjoys, seeing that we enjoy. It is rasa or not?
Certainly rasa.
How can you say it is rasa vihinam? It is not rasa vihinam. According to Bharata's Natya Shastra, Nritta is one of the elements of Angika Abhinaya.
Yes. Abhinaya means communicating what? Rasa.
Communication. When there is communication, there has to be bhava and rasa in it. If it is well done.
Yes.
If
Of course, that class goes. Incidentally, your students Sundari Santanam along with me did Karana Viniyoga Malika dedicated to you, showing that what you realized has been practiced. It is since Abhinav Gupta, the Viniyoga of so many Karanas have been given in Abhinav Bharati itself. Based on that, it is extended. And you told about you composing music for that, and it's a very important section. It has to be discussed separately, and it's worthwhile discussing as a research topic itself. The inseparability of music, the sound and sight, it's very, very unique, and that has added lot. And those who are unable to reconstruct movement without music and visualize music without movement, they'll be incomplete.
That's why most of the shlokas of even Vyayamas, Charis, everything, I had tuned.
Yes.
Nritta Hasta also I tuned, so that it's easier for students to remember. When they listen to that particular musical phrase, they will immediately perform. They will not forget.
Let alone the raga, even the gamakas, even the swarasthanas, even the shrutis, they suggest which type of movement. When there is a movement of the higher level, it will be naturally going higher octaves. And when there is a jara gamaka, you will be having that gliding movement, sliding of the feet, such things. When you have a Kampita Gamaka, will be having Griva Rechika, Bahu Rechika, such things. It's a very integral, inseparable part of it.
Because the body, according to Upanishadic idea, is a veena. Body itself is veena, like how you change the length of the string, different notes and different gamakas are produced. Like how the veena produces the gamaka, in the body there are movements which are called rechakas. So the counterpart of gamaka in dance is rechaka. Without rechaka, karanas can be a very, very robotic execution. It will be absolutely robotic. So it is the rechaka which gives the character to the movement. And without rechaka, suppose, you know, this is just putting, suppose I take it and put it like that, and there is a rechaka of the head, it changes the movement. Now we should go in for some of the other interpretations because of recensions or following Sangeeta Ratnakara. As I said, whenever I didn't have Abhinav Gupta's commentary, I relied on Sangeeta Ratnakara for reconstructing particularly the basic Anga, Upanga and Charis. I've already recorded them in my Karana Prakaranam DVD. We will just try to show you some of the other interpretations which I have not recorded. Mahati will perform this for you. Gayatri will keep reading. Maybe we should start from Rittahasta.
I'd just like to add one thing. You were telling that even from the Angas you had to reconstruct on your own. Here you were saying that for the Angas, you came from, as Anna said, reverse engineering. Like you read the uses, and then if for Akampitam, it means questioning, ordering. You don't do it this way. It has to be assertive,
Logic.
So,
Loka to Veda.
yes. So,
Loka to Veda.
the Angas and Upangas, you said you had to do it that way.
Yeah.
So, was it the same way that you used for the sthanas, Nrittahastas also, or you came from the description of the movement?
For sthanas and Nrittahastas, I went only into the description. But for head, naturally, you know, you accept, you don't say, I accept. So, it depends on Aman. We say no and we say yes. So, these are basic, I would even think basic human nature.
Sarvatrika Anubhavam.
Because here I would like to add, Natya Shastra speaks of also Cheshta Krita.
Yes.
Many people don't remember that.
Beautiful.
Many of the dramas that we have, the skits that we have, the modern plays that we have in any language, you take it even English or any language, what is being performed on the stage is Cheshta Krita. It is also mentioned in Natya Shastra. Yes. It's not as though it should be Natya Dharmi. That is all Loka Dharmi. Entire thing is Loka Dharmi. And it is confirmed that it is one more art. So you can't belittle Cheshta Krita. You cannot belittle Loka Dharmi.
Yes. It's a misnomer.
It's a misnomer. Loka Dharmi is being belittled.
Abused.
I can tell you one thing. Bala Saraswati's Abhinaya was extraordinary because it was 80% it was only Loka Dharmi.
Even the 7th chapter, we have Anubhavas. 99% of the Anubhavas are Loka Dharmi. They are Cheshta Krita. And when they are aesthetically touched here and there, they become Natya Dharmi.
I learnt from the last Devadasi of Kapalishwara temple, Mylapore, Chennai, Gauri Ammal. Gauri Ammal was the first teacher for Bala Saraswati also.
Yes.
And these Devadasis used to perform Abhinaya only in Loka Dharmi style.
Yes.
They didn't bother about Natya Dharmi to say you.
Even
they would say you. That you would be very different. That you, if it is very respectful you, they will do this. If not respectful you, they will do this. So It was all part of, I would say, it all came from within. It came from within.
Lokadharmi is like Swabhavukti and Natyadharmi is like Vakrokti. Swabhavukti is Adya Alankriti, Dandi says. And Lokadharmi cannot be belittled by a sensitive person who is tuned into Shastras.
You call it as Anukirtana of life. And not just Anukarana alone. Anything which is in Natya is a glorification of whatever happens in normal life.
So Lokadharmi is transcended to Natya.
Yes.
But Lokadharmi is the substratum.
That sattva has to be there in any dharmi.
Exactly.
Any angika has to be backed by sattva. If there is no sattva, then the whole thing is robotic only.